Oh, you got it. Fine. If I pick this up on something, it would be a little better. Do we have something, Azain? Anything? Not soil.
Right there, the plastic box right there.
A little something that would help. Oh, that's perfect. Sorry. Chaim al bracha. Yes. So worried about the video. What about us? Yeah. Oh, it's always out. Chaim. I'm gonna forget that this is even on. Chaim. So he reminded me of a Gishmak Mice, because he said it's Machzach. The Altarebe used to, one of the things he took achrayas in the Baal Shem Tov, the Rebbe Shaf said the name of the Baal Rebbe Shaf said that the Baal Shem Tov said before the Altarebe's neshama came down to the world. We all know neshama chadasha, but the Baal Shem Tov said that the Altarebe kommt an neshama was geht nemen achrayas of Klal Yisrael bis Mashiach wird kommen. Oh wow, very powerful statement. Where do you see that? The Sefer or on Sefer? Sefer Pnine HaKeser. Got those. And there it says where the source is from other places. In any case, the Baal Shem Tov said that a neshama that's going to take responsibility for all of the Jewish people until Mashiach comes. Which, as you see, the ones who are responsible for the Jewish people, the Chassidus Chabad, the Chabad Rabbeim took responsibility for the Jewish people. So one of the things the Altarebe was Isaac. There's a lot of Jews living in the far-lying place, especially the Baal Shem Tov and the Altarebe encouraged many Jews in the Maggid to move back out after the Chmielnicki massacres. Yidden were terrified to live where they're not protected. They were scared, so they were living in large enclaves in big cities. So Yidden were terrified to go out and the Baal Shem Tov wanted, and the Altarebe very much. The Altarebe spent his entire dowry to get Yidden into farming. Yidden should move because it was very hard for Parnassa. When Yidden are, like Ramendel said, when the Chabad Chassidim are together, it's like fertilizer, he said. If you spread them out everywhere, they do really well. You put them together, so it's the Altarebe wanted that Chassidim should spread and be everywhere, and so that we can change the world. That's the Yidden. But no, the Iker Inyan was Parnassa-wise. It was very difficult Parnassa for the Yidden living in close places. Problem was that once you started scattering Yidden, there was a problem, meaning setting them up in different places. You needed chinuch for the children. So one of the things he instituted, I saw this in Takanas, I don't know if it was part of Takanas Liyajne, but one of the Takanas the Altarebe instituted at that time, anybody that was under his influence, that every person who owns an inn, or especially those who own a few of them, there were some people who franchised, they had a couple of inns that were like under their thing, they're mechuyev to take out a melamed, to give him a full salary, and the Altarebe even said the amount of the salary, the wages, how much it has to be to support a Malamed, and so on and so forth. So one of these towns, one of these inns, there was a simple Yid, and there was a Malamed there. He came before the Shoshana, and the Malamed notifies his boss that he's leaving for the Shoshana. He's not going to stay. And so the guy said, "What do you mean leaving for Shoshana? This is what we need you for. We were all counting that we're going to have a chazan, we're going to have a batzvila, we're going to have someone who knows how to blow shofar. Okay. We were finally going to have someone. Okay, is that a fun to my Rebbe? I have to go to my Rebbe. I said, Rebbe, you're the Rebbe. Rebbe, du bist the Rebbe. What do you mean? He totally didn't get it. He had no asag, he didn't understand what I mean. He was explaining to him, I could be a rabbi or this. But my Rebbe, I always have an argument with someone. I give a share in someone's office. And one of the Rebbe there always says to me, "Nu Rebbe, was machst du?" He always calls me Rebbe. And I always give a chocolate trace. He said, "Rebbe, ich bin nicht der Rebbe." He says, "No, you're a shlich of the Rebbe, so you're the Rebbe." That's what he learned already. But in any case, he said, "What do you mean a Rebbe? You're our Rebbe." So he said, "No." Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year. Everybody has to come to the Rosh, to the head, to the Rebbe, you have to go to the Rebbe. Anyways, So this guy thinks, all right, you know what? If you're going there, maybe we should also go. So he asked him if I can come along. I said, for sure. How did I? He figured now I get a ride. He was going to have to walk. It would take him a place about Schlepsach. He was poor. He didn't have any. Let me just see. Wi-Fi. Is there a Wi-Fi over here?
There is actually. They gave it. You have it?
Anybody has it? Let's talk.
Hold on one second. I have one second. I think I have it. Hold on.
And maybe it's going to help. There's something called optimum Wi-Fi. This seems to be no, it's required. Sign in required.
No optimum estimate. If you have an optimum account, you have free Wi-Fi over.
That's good. But it says sign in is required.
I don't see it.
If you don't see it, let's see if it's working.
Your phone connects to it? No. The lady, I thought she sent it to me.
All right. So so the whole chevra come. When he arrives by the Altarebe, so this Malamed was a chassid that people knew. So he was getting all these warm shalom aleichem, and everybody was hugging him, and so on and so forth. The Malamed's this innkeeper, no one had any idea who he was. So he got a little higher here and there, but there wasn't much. He didn't like it because he's his worker, he's getting all the attention, and here's a ganze garnish. I think it was maybe before the Shoshana, after the Shoshana, exactly when it was that the Altarebe, the people were going into Yechidus. So he saw here that people are going in, so he decided he also wants to come. Malamed is going, he's going. He got online and he was behind the Malamed. Malamed went in, spent time with the Altarebe, whatever, came out, and then it was his turn. When he came in, he had no idea what Yechidus is. Never was a Yechidus, very simple person. Anyway, standing in front of the Altarebe, and the Altarebe is waiting for him to say something. He doesn't say anything. So the Altarebe says to him, no. So he says, "Was nuketer? What are you looking about?" He says to the Altarebe. So okay. So the Altarebe starts saying, "No." The Altarebe says, "As a yid, person, this is life. It happens that a person does so and so. When this treft sich amal, and this and this, that a person does so and so, and it's macht sich because of whatever reservation. Macht azoy, if he gets to take negelvans, macht sich amal. Altarebe goes through." And basically, he's going through this guy's all of his inyan. So he listens. He hears someone who knows all the secrets, and he gets really, really upset. And he goes out of Yechidus. He says, "Must be Yoshen." How does he know? Must be that the Malamed went in before him. He told him because he knows everything in the house. He told him, so he was running to the Malamed, and he starts yelling at him. You have it so good by me. I take care of you. I give you a livelihood. I give you parnos, and I never bother you. And I let you do your own thing. And I let you do a day off here and there. And I get them out with the dark. And this is what you do to me. You can go find yourself another job. Practic. I don't still come back. Now the Malamed is in trouble. So he somehow he got back to the Altarebe, and he told the Altarebe that now he got himself fired from his job because this guy thinks that he's talented. Because he told him, he said, no, it's impossible that the Rebbe knew without you telling him. How then would he know? The Altarebe sent for this innkeeper. He came back, and the Altarebe said, "What are you accusing the Malamed for saying something? Malamed didn't say anything to me." So he says, how do you know all my stuff? How do you know? So he says, I said something about you? It could happen. It could happen so. It could happen so. It could happen. I never said anything. So he said, you didn't know. So he started crying there, and the Altarebe gave him a tikkun for all his inyan, and he gave a chassid. That's the story, because I remembered when you said,
Very good.
Good thing is when you're going into the Rebbe, it's usually good to start the conversation on something. Just standing, like a cloth, Stacy, it might get a little different. You might just read down the Altarebe. We don't realize how kind Altarebe is. He didn't look at anything. He didn't look. He just was looking at business. What you can get done. What he can get out of you. He didn't care. It was not into dining. Let's go. In any case, l'chaim lebrach. So today I had a certain experience that kind of set the tone for today's Fabrengen, in a sense that I flew in from LA yesterday. I came in actually for a wedding. Tomorrow night is a Zirkin wedding. Oh, Stern Zirkin. Not Stern Zirkin. What's her name? Yitzchak Zirkin's daughter. What's her name? Yeah. Brina. Yeah, that's right. Brina's getting married tomorrow night.
Oh.
Someone from not a Chabad guy, initially from Williamsburg, Freund. So came in for the wedding because they're machatana with us. The Zirkin is my Adam, and we're very close to them. Mendel Zirkin, my son. In any case, so I came in and last night we went to I went to Philly because I have a daughter in Philly. So we got there 3 a.m. And today I met up with them with my 8 o'clock. I had a new granddaughter about 3 weeks ago. And simchas by everybody. And so it's always special to go meet your new granddaughter. So we met at the pizza shop, and I'm sitting there. And then we went to the house. But first we went, and I'm sitting with I haven't seen them for a couple of since Pesach. Pesach they were by me. It's not that long, but still, it's the Anikel, especially a new Anikel, and it's a sensation. What can you do? It's an enormous sensation of, and it suddenly dawned on me while I'm sitting there that I'm in such a state of deep satisfaction and happiness, just because I'm here with my grandchildren that I haven't seen in such a long time. For me, it was long, especially this new grandchild that I never saw, and it made me such a deep satisfaction and a simcha. And it occurred to me that, when we come together for Fabrengen, the Altarebe comes, because you make a Fabrengen for the Altarebe is here. There is such a deep sense of satisfaction to the Altarebe. Just because we showed up, just because we're there. The Rebbe is our father, the Altarebe is our Zayden. He's happy. It's almost because of all the hoo-ha that we make about the Rabbeim, about the greatness and the awesomeness and the holiness and their expectations and their stuff like that. We forget the very family side of it. Chassidus is a mashpacha. Chassidus is not just, it's not a philosophy. It's not a cold philosophy. It's a family. And the Rabbeim are the parents. They're and they care with a oimik pnimi on the pashat to gashmis to life. So if someone one of my enaklach that's too young to ask for too many things, but at one of them asked me at that moment for something, it wouldn't have been like anything I would do. Anything I would do because I was in such a state of satisfaction. So as we sit together at a Fabrengen like this, the Altarebe is in a state of such joy, simply joy. We came out for him. People today's days, it became very common that for parents, it's 50th, families get together. It started the last 10 years. People go to homes, they celebrate families. People go to house in Morristown. There are different places where you can facilitate, but people celebrate. The Altarebe has a huge nachas when we get together on his Rani Pashut. It's in a state of happiness. And doesn't see any of our chazarai. There, the guy was standing and waiting, so he said, "No, shine now." To open the conversation. This time I was like, he doesn't see any of it. He just sees lichtigkeit. He sees joy. He sees happiness, and he wants to bench us, and he wants to give us what we have in mind right now. Brachos for everybody, and all you need. This year is very unique for Teves. It was unique this year. It's always unique, but this year is a special number. The number, but this year is also 210 years since the Altarebe's established. So every number is significant, but there's something very unique about 210. When it occurred to me 210, I thrive on numbers a lot. When it occurred to me 210, I'm thinking, what's the significance of 210? We went out of Mitzrayim after the Eish Yud Shana. The Altarebe is definitely shaykh to the Geulah for many reasons. But his Yahrtzeit comes out in the Parshias of the Geulah, and I'm Shmois is still Golas. Even Shmois is ready to begin. Sometimes it comes out of Shmois. But Ve'edah for sure, like it comes out this year, in Gimel Parshas Ve'edah. It sends Moshe V'Aaron, Heima Oimdim, that the people selected to be the Goyel. It's interesting, this, if you noticed, Yahrtzeit Kislev this year, and in many years is the year in which the parsha discusses. Chaf this year was Chaf Kislev. Was the parsha that discusses the birth of Yehuda and Peretz. Sorry, Peretz and Zer. Yehuda's story with Yehuda and Tamar, the birth of Peretz. Well, Yahrtzeit Kislev is not stam a pediyah of the Altarebe. It's the pediyah of Malchus Beis David. This is the future. That's why Yehuda Peretz is born. That's the whole Leidas Mashiach is in the birth of Yahrtzeit Kislev. So that's why. Why did the Altarebe says that he went out and he associates it with the pasuk Pada B'Shalom. Pada B'Shalom, the Pashtus, just Pashut Shalmikra. Pada B'Shalom is David HaMelech talking about his pediyah from his enemies, from those who are seeking time. So the Altarebe sings Pada B'Shalom for his pediyah is because his pediyah is the pediyah of David HaMelech. Because as the Rebbe Shaf said, Mir Zenedach Malchus Beis David. That's the family. It's the royal family. You know, in the Akdama for Yom Yom, really astonishing. In the Akdama for Yom Yom, how did the Rebbe be? It's the first sefer we have from our Rebbe. Think about it. First sefer we have from our Rebbe. Is the Agada came first? Okay, so I asked actually a while ago. So when I was giving over this. Could be. I asked it a few weeks ago when I was said it. I asked the people: is Agada first or is Yom Yom first? So someone told me it was that Yom Yom first, but okay, interesting. But so the first two svarim we have. So Agada Shal Pesach. Why the Rebbe gave us Agada Shal Pesach? Because that's his inyan. Gulasan Shal Yisrael. That's the Rebbe's inyan. He's Yudalef Nisan, Chodesh Shagula. The Rebbe's inyan is the Giyul. So the Rebbe's first inyan that he gives us is he gives us a pirush on the Agada, a whole new way of looking at the Agada. But in addition to that, he got Yom Yom. And Yom Yom, the Yom Yom starts with a biography of all the Rebbe. When the Rebbe goes through the biography, it's interesting. He doesn't, because since it's a Luach HaYom Yom, it's not the word that he uses over there. But he says, L'chasidei Chabad. So he doesn't mention the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. He goes through the biography of literally the Rabbeim of Chabad. On the Altarebe, it's interesting that he doesn't start with the Altarebe. He starts, no, he starts, the Yom Yom literally starts with the Maral of Prague. He begins with the Maral of Prague, which is very interesting, because I know the Maral of Prague is very great, and who can fathom the Maral? Yet the fact that the Altarebe stands alone on his own yichus. The Altarebe doesn't need the Maral to be what substantiates him. You saw a few weeks ago there was one of these video clips, one of these short videos, where there was someone who comes to the Rebbe and he says he's a Rav and the whole thing, and then he also says he's a Nechet from the Altarebe. So but then he says I'm also a Rav. So the Rebbe says to him, the Tanya Rabbanis is less to me, or something like that. And it's like that. The famous story that when the Maggid was a little boy, there was a sreif in his house. His whole house got burnt down, and his mother was weeping. The Maggid's mother was weeping. So that the Maggid said to his mother, "Why are you crying? After all, it's noch Kashmirs. We know the Maggid's entire life. He dismissed Kashmirs completely. Like you see that the famous story where the person came to visit him and he asked him, this is how you live? How do you live like this? He said, I'm just passing through, like the song, the 8th day song, we know the song, passing through. I'm here now. So the Maggid says to his mother when he's a little boy, gosh, please, to cry like this, to be so upset. She said, no, I don't care about whatever they didn't have much anyways, whatever got burnt down. I care because we had a special Megillas Yuchs. We had a Megillah which had Yichus, and our Megillah of Yichus was a Yichus until David HaMelech, and it got burnt, and that's irreplaceable. That's what I'm going to write. So the Maggid said, "Mama veinish, mother, don't cry. I'm going to start you a new Yichus." The Maggid's Yichus, the Ruzhin, all comes from the Maggid and Cloud. The Maggid, the Altarebe, and all. So this the Maggid says. So the Altarebe has enough to stand on his own. The Maral, but there's something interesting. The Rebbe doesn't only say that he's an inkel of the Maral. You look at the Hayom Yom. The Rebbe names exactly every single name of all the in-betweens. The Maral had a son, Betzalel. Betzalel had a son, I don't remember all the names. The Moshe, there's a Baruch, all the names that there are, and then you get to the Altarebe. So it's very strange. Like that's the opening. It's the first thing that Rebbe tells us. You read when he speaks about the Maral, he says he's Maran of Yehuda, whatever, and he's Migeza Hagoinim, Hamuyuchasim, David ben Yishai. That's what the Rebbe says. Hamuyuchasim is Miyuchis to David ben Yishai. And when you count exactly how many there are, you see that there are, the Altarebe is number 8. And if you count further, then you count all the way up, the Rebbe is number 14. So you go from, what's the Indian? David. Because David is going to 14. David was the 14th in the lineage from because the Zohar says, we know the reason why the Beis Hamikdash stood in all of its glory during the time of David HaMelech didn't. David laid the foundation. Shlomo HaMelech was the one who built the Beis Hamikdash, because the Seder of Am Yisrael is the Seder of the moon. And the moon waxes and wanes. And the amount of time that the moon waxes is 14 days, 14 and a half days, and then it starts to wane. So Shleimus Halavana is between 14 and 15. And just like it was the first time, Isman, back then, that it started from Avram Avinu and it reached this peak, then there were 15 generations until Tzidkiyahu. Tzidkiyahu was the last one, which is the last king of Malchus Beis David. And then Malchus Beis David kind of went underground. Not that it disappeared, because the moon, even when you don't see its light, it didn't disappear. That we don't see its light. Malchus Beis David carries through all the generations and reappeared when the Rebbe is saying that the 14 generations, from the Maral, is the lights of Malchus Beis David start coming back, and the Rebbe is the 14th. In any case, it's interesting. So based on this, so the Altarebe, so this year is 210 years since the Istalkus of the Altarebe. 210 years is the Zman of when the Geula happened. The Geula happened. Now the Altarebe is mentioned, his entire Metzias is Geula, is redemption. What is it, Rebbe? The Rebbe is here to lift us out of our Mitzarim Begulus. Our Rabbeim Chassidus, the foundations of Chassidus is Perek Mem Zayin and Tanya. Every Perek in Tanya is a foundation. But one of the most powerful, beautiful, and essential Perakim in Tanya, which is actually easy to study and to learn again and again, is Perek Mem Zayin. Perek Mem Zayin is the Altarebe how explains how every single day when you say Krishma and you experience Achdus Havaya, you're Mikayim, you're actually going out of Mitzrayim. The Yetzias Nefesh Lekis every single day. So since today is 210 years, the Altarebe's Istalkus, which the Altarebe's Inyan is. The Altarebe's Inyan is. Wow. I just met your daughter, and I'm telling her all that I was glad to see you. She didn't tell me you're here.
Next to it. I'm next to it all year.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. The fact that it's 210 years since the Altarebe's Istalkus, which is the power of Geula in its full power, is a time when every single one of us can deeply come out of all of our mitzarim and all of our limitations. So right now, our limitations have all in on. We have our ruchnistic boundaries and pressing matters that weigh us down. We have deep elements of constrictions of whatever past in yonim that weigh on our hearts and weigh on our conscience. We also have sometimes material burdens and all kinds of other types of worries and concerns, which we don't want to talk about because we don't want to get anybody into a state of gloominess. But what we need to understand is that these inyanim sit on our hearts, and it creates a little bit of a constriction. So right now, as we're sitting by the Fabrengen, the power of 210 years of Geula, of the Altarebe, which is the time of, even though it's Yahrtzeit, but again, it's the time of Istalkus, the time of the Altarebe's energy is in full power and in full bloom, is a time that we can wish each other at a very, very deep level, that every single Meitzah Gevul that anybody's in right now we should come out of it. We should break free, both on an individual level, if it's matters of health, matters regarding Shalom Bayis, matters of Shidduchim, matters of relationship with children, matters of financial matters, and matters of whatever the constrictions may be. Right now is a time of tapping the energy to free ourselves, pick ourselves up, and come out of the darkness. So l'chaim a little bit.
Where are we going with all this? That's the question.
We're warming up. We're warming up.
Still need the Wi-Fi?
If there is, it's working. So if it's working, not making up.
What's the bottom line?
The bottom. Because the bottom line is Mashiach will come and shine Yahrtzeit. That's the bottom line. What else? We're going to sit around and we're hopefully going to come a little bit into Mashiach take a space right now. That's it. What's not good? Always the Mashiach Geulah. That's it. Yes.
My friend.
Nice. Hi.
He has a nice holy spot.
Yeah.
Have you been inside? Can you get in there?
I know him. I never really invited myself over.
So why don't you invite yourself over? They don't do the market at Ocean. LA. LA was my, I used to with my staff around for a while.
That's what they can. Hi. Water, plain water. Take up a chair.
Right? Yeah, no.
We get this.
Later, when you bring everybody to
Chaim.
the first rung of the ladder.
Chaim. When we think about the Altarebe, the word that comes most to mind, Altarebe is a chiddush. Chiddush meaning novel. The Altarebe is the most out-of-the-box person probably ever to live. The Altarebe has turned Yiddishkeit over, literally flipped every aspect of Judaism. The entire view of everything changes it's hard sometimes to appreciate that, to see that, and to know that when you come from and born and bred in Lubavitch. So you kind of don't know like the way things are looked at outside. And today's days, it's hard even for people that are born outside of Lubavitch, because the Altarebe infiltrated and Hasidus became so much the way of thinking of the whole world that we don't really find pure misnagdim and pure people who had a previous mindset. But you still can experience that, the very much olam habadiga mindset, which you sometimes come across about, everything is about olam haba, everything is about world to come, everything is about, and so much. But the Altarebe is literally a chiddush. Every perek in Tanya is a revolution. It's a revolution. The perek Beis in Tanya, we talk about just the Altarebe makes it accessible, even though the concept itself is a concept that says already, but the fact that everybody's a chelik alakai mimal mamish, and Hashem is not a nivid, it's not a holy spiritual being that is connected to God, but that the neshama is a little piece of God from above. Now, even though again, the germ of the idea stayed already earlier, but the Altarebe made that. Everybody knows chelik alakai mimal mamish. Where do you know it's from Tanya? Tanya made that a phrase and a normal and a household, if you can say, attitude, and so on and so forth. Even the idea that we have that we're not dealing just with Yahrtzeit and Yetzer in the first perek, but that we have two lives to live. We have two nefashos, two complete different beings living inside of us. It's one of the things the Altarebe said that he started feeling when he was a little boy. The Altarebe said, when I was a little boy, I think 7, 8 years old, I already started having a sense that we have two complete different nefashos. And that was like, imagine a boy thinking that at that age already. Like at a young child, he has already a sense that the two different nefashos, it's not just two leanings this way. It's not just one confused being who's a little bit like, who gravitates to heaven and who has two inclinations, so on and so forth. You go through Tanya, every single Pedic after Pedic, the Altarebe flips the world over. But one of the primary real revolutions in Chidushim of Tanya is when we read Perek Lamed Vav and Perek Lamed Zayin and Tanya, mainly Perek Lamed Vav and Tanya, where the Altarebe kind of opens up an understanding of the purpose of creation, the purpose of existence, and that literally determines the focus in Yiddishkeit, completely opposite of what everybody has always experienced the purpose of existence to be till that point, and therefore the energy and the focus is completely different.
Share with the audience what it was before, what it is now.
So the Altarebe comes and lays out that Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyas lo'idira b'tachtonim. That's where it matters. And that the Eibishter has a taiva, and then the Altarebe has explained the Samach Vav, but the Altarebe said a taiva is kankashanish, which basically means it's not something that you can explain based on any rationale. It's a plain pure insanity that has no explanation. The Eibishter wants something because he wants, and it's rooted in Atzmos Mamish. The Eibishter has a desire, and what does he want? He wants Tachten Shein Tachten Lamata Memenu, and therefore the Guf is more important than the Neshama, and therefore Gashmias is more important than Ruchni is, and therefore reaching the darkest places in the world and lighting them up is the greatest thing, and therefore if you do a mitzvah with a Jew one time, it's everything, because the physical body just did a mitzvah. It doesn't make a difference if the person becomes from. If your Yiddishkeit is based on Olam Haba, on which means based on spirituality, based on reaching certain levels of refinement and elevation, then it's a whole different process. Then obviously doing a mitzvah with a yid one time is meaningless, because now kind of Olam Haba is generated from that. What kind of a ruchniistic connection is? If the purpose is bringing the Eibishter down, expressing him in physicality one time, no, through this yid's guf gashmis, this galag of an Eibishter in this world, that's higher than anything. And so on and so forth. Everything flips over. The Altarebe's chiddush and dira b'tachtonim is crazy. It transforms. Ad kedei kach. We all know the story that the Rebbe asked Reb Chaim Gutnik. Famous story. The Rebbe asked Reb Chaim Gutnik when he was by him on Yechidus. The Rebbe asked him. The Rebbe had a special, really, relationship and a certain with Reb Chaim Gutnik in a unique way. In any case, the Rebbe asked him, "Was haben sie auf mir?" The Rebbe asked, what's the tightness that the non-Chabad world, and particularly the Rosh Yeshivas, have on him? What are they upset about against? The Rebbe knew that he's not necessarily the most loved. And the Rebbe asked, why is it? What do they have against me? And he answered the Rebbe 2 things. Number one is that you don't consult with anybody. You march to your own beat. You do your own things. Every few weeks you have a new campaign, every few months, a few years, whatever. And you trask the whole world with your new campaigns, and you never consulted, not with Agudas Yisrael, not with the Sachtas Arabonim, not with Yahrtzeit. There are other rabbis of the world. There are other great tzaddikim. There are great rabbanim, great people, and they're talking great people. And the Rebbe doesn't talk to anybody. He does his own inyanim, and we don't find that by anybody else. Especially if you're going to make changes in the direction of Judaism, if you're going to like direct the Jewish people into various different types of things that are different than what was before. Call a meeting, consult, send letters out, discuss it with your peers, so to speak, the leaders of the Jewish people. That's one Tanya that they had on the Rebbe. He ignores everybody. The other Tanya they said is the Rebbe took a little medrashal. That's what they said. The Rebbe took a little medrashal, and which it says, Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu that the Eibishter wants to have a deal with them, and the Rebbe built this entire infrastructure of all of Yiddishkeit all around this one Nakuda, that the Eibishter wants us to be Mavada, the Gashmis, the physical, the lowly part of the world, that needs to be elevated. So even though it's a medrash, you can't argue on a medrash, but there's hundreds of, there's 100,000 medrashim. And there's many things that support others seemingly. For example, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, this world is like an antechamber, it's like a passing through. The world to come is a world that's letraklin. Prepare yourself in the providence, in the outer room. And the way most people understand it, that means prepare yourself for Gan Eden. The more mitzvahs you do, this world, and according to that philosophy, the Gashmius of this world has no intrinsic value. Gashmius is dark, Gashmius is lowly, Gashmius is a distraction, Gashmius is very, very what God, but the person is sent, and according to that, the darkness of this world is merely a test to see how we can overcome, we can shun the Gashmius, push it away, and reject it, and maintain a spiritual existence. Through this, because we're tested, then our connection to spirituality becomes stronger and deeper, similar to the famous Sikha that Rebbe, the difference between Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe is that old school. Menashe is the way I'm holding on to my memory of my neshama. I'm holding on. And the whole Gashmius of this world, the Maila of Gashmius is only not Gashmius. Gashmius is dark and lowly and ugly. The only thing is it's meant to test me and to see what I'm made out of, how truly godly I am. And if I can make it through, then I go to Gan Eden. So the main Inyan is Gan Eden. The Altarebe, however, so he said, the Altarebe comes and switches and bases everything on the Oimek HaKavana is to get down and do mitzvahs begashmis and be mezachich the guf. This is such a radical change, and based on that, changes everything. In other words, are you going to spend your entire life in a yeshiva, in enclaves of holiness, learning Gemara Rashi Teves, which are all gewaldig and beautiful in Yanim? That's what you're going to be doing. Or you're going to go out and conquer the world. You're going to reach the darkest places, find Yidden, build yeshivas, chadarim, mikvahs, holiness, Jewishness, godliness across the entire world. If you're coming from a perspective pre-Altarebe, pre-Dira B'Tachtainim, it's all meaningless. It's all meaningless. Okay, there is an Inyan a bit of Avos Yisrael. You're probably going to help a Yid. But there's no intrinsic value in Dafke going to a faraway place, a place that doesn't know the Eibishter, Vayikra Sham B'Shem Hashem Keilolam. It's not important. It's important to be a Amanifcha, to be a chosen people. It serves God, and that's it. That's the Nekuda. That's the Nekud. So he said to the Rebbe, these are the tainas, these are the arguments that the world has against you. So the Rebbe answered him, one thing is answered by the other. In other words, if you take the two inyanim and you put them together, you can realize it. If, the Rebbe said these words, the Rebbe said, if the whole purpose of creation, the whole purpose and the whole reason why we exist, all that it is, it's a little medrashal. So how do you expect me, when I plan to further the purpose of creation, to move the world to the next stage, how do you plan me to consult with this planning board if their whole fundamental understanding of what it's all about, it still has not been updated to the teaching of the Altarebe. And that's, by the way, the reason why it's so always it's never kedai arguing when it comes to people who are not with Chassidus, because arguings don't get you anywhere, because your foundational understanding of who you are and what you are in the world is different. The only thing you do is learn Chassidus. If you learn Chassidus, suddenly it's an eye-opener. Suddenly you open up the mind and you start seeing things differently. You see things differently. Fundamentally, you see things differently. And then everything Lubavitch does, that Rebbe does, makes perfectly sense. Of course, this is it, because you're coming from a whole different perspective. So the Altarebe's I can't say most profound chiddush, because how can we go measure? But one of the most profound chiddushim of the Altarebe, which is so central in the theme of all the memorim, is the concept of Dira B'Tachtainim, is this taiva of the Eibishter, to fulfill it, to bring godliness to the lowest and to the lowest and the darkest of the dark. Question is, why did the Altarebe discover this? When you had like throughout all the Gedolei Yisrael from all the generations. Ganz, talking about, like Alman Yisrael, Yidden have tzaddikim, chassidim, geonim, gedoshim, generations after generations after generations. Now, obviously, you can't say the Altarebe didn't create the Nekuda. It's an Medrash. And some of it, you have already some of the seeds of it is discussed a little bit here and a little bit there. Titus Baal Shem Tov already came, the Baal Shem Tov, and made us appreciate in Yonei Choil, Kol Masach Yiloshem Shamayim was a fundamental principle in Titus Baal Shem Tov, a very big shift from earlier. And I was serving the Eibushter with Gashmias. But the Altarebe was the one who turned it into an entire philosophy. He kind of broadened it, and he brought out the oimek of it. And then in a Geras HaKodesh, the Altarebe teaches us how Yesha Gashmi is Yesha Amiti. That Atzmos, that the grubkeit of Gashmias itself is the Eibushter hiding his deepest truth. Because what's the truth of Atzmos? Atzmos is truth. Mitzvusay Matzmusay. Atzmos exists not from anything else, right? Atzmos is because it is, not because something making it. What's the grubkeit of Gashmias? Grubkeit of Gashmias is that Gashmias feels independent. It doesn't feel that it has a source. So the Altarebe says that very grubkeit of Gashmias is something that Gashmias is borrowing from Atzmos. Gashmias is just basically taking the Eibushter's identity and that's why the Altarebe says there's nothing like Gashmias. When you will use Gashmias to serve the Eibushter, you'll discover Atzmos. How come the Altarebe is the one who knows this? How come the Altarebe is the one who has this understanding of Nesava HaKadosh Baruch Hu Li'is L'Dira B'Tachtainim, and this becomes the fundamental principle? Where did he go different than everybody else before him? This revolution. I think that but it says, we know that the revolution, the Altarebe's chidushim, are related to something much deeper. The reason the Altarebe is out of the box, completely out of the box, completely outside of the way everybody else was thinking until his time. He challenged everything. The reason the Altarebe is out of the box is because he himself is an neshama chadash. No, he's an out-of-the-box soul. Lichatchila, he's not part of the neshamas that we know. He's completely outside of the system. Because his neshama is a neshama chadasha, that's where every thought and every word that comes out of his mouth is chiddush. It's totally a complete new Indian because he's a new soul. What does new soul mean? So generally, the Baal Shem Tov said that when the Altarebe was born, the Baal Shem Tov said that even before the Altarebe, the Baal Shem Tov was excited that a new neshama is coming to the world. And he was saying that new neshama is coming, and then the Baal Shem Tov spoke about the seder of when a new neshama comes to the world, the preparations that happen l'mayla, and so on and so forth. And the day the Altarebe was born, the Baal Shem Tov came and brought l'chaim, was Chayelo, was the Baal Shem Tov's birthday, and he said, "Heint is the neshama chadash geboiden geworden," whatever. It's all b'sebe Chayelo. And then on the Altarebe's upshed, the Baal Shem Tov again fabrengt with the chassidim. The Altarebe was by him. The Baal Shem Tov was excited about the Altarebe that he's neshama chadash. So one of the places where the Rebbe talks about neshama chadasha, the Rebbe is mitzvah. Now, how do we understand neshama chadasha? Most people, neshama chadasha means that he's not recycled. We know that there is a system called Gilgulim, and all of us have been around the block many times. Recycled souls. The Altarebe is a naya neshama. He wasn't been here. By the time the Altarebe comes on to the world, we're dealing already with over 5,000 years. The neshamas have mostly come around. Very hard to find. Where to find the neshama who's here the first time? That's bepashtis, the understanding of what means neshama chadash. But the Rebbe's mitzayin on neshama chadash, the Rebbe says, "Ayin b'Lakuti Torah parsha Shmini." So if you look in Lakuti Torah parsha Shmini, there's a mimer over there. There's a short mimer of the Yasin Zeh Yatzar to l'Sachik Boy, and then there's a longer beer. And the beer on Levi Yasin, that's what I think it is. The Altarebe is bringing an arizal, fascinating arizal, where he says over there that all neshamas were nichlal and neshama of Adam Arishon. Everybody's part of Adam Arishon's neshama. Right? So can you really say anybody's a neshama chadash? Even if you have a neshama that was never here, a non-recycled soul, but he was here. Because the neshama was inside Adam Arishon's neshama. So there is really no neshama chadash. There's a famous story. There's a famous story with Rebbe Zushin and Rebbe Lemelach, the two brothers, when they used to go and they prophet Golos together. It's beautiful stories related to the Rebbe Zushin and Rebbe Lemelach. So one of the times they ended up in an inn, and there were a bunch of shikere goyim over there that were drinking and they were dancing or whatever. And suddenly they see the Yidden on the corner. They decided to have fun. So they grabbed the Bezusha and they picked him up and they were dancing with him. And as they were dancing and they were shoving him and punching him and this, and they were giving him a very hard time. But he's going to fight with the guy. And after they really roughed him up for a while, they sent him flying. They threw him and he went flying and he fell back down. And finally, they would dafka, they didn't mind. They were doing this for purifications. So he fell down next to his brother and he's there. They're dancing again, and they took a break. They're sitting there, whatever. And then music starts again, and they get up again, and they're dancing again. They grab Rezusha a second time. And again, the Nebuch giving him whatever, sodas. And then after a while, they throw him back down. And after 2 times, Rebbe Melech says to the Bezusha, he says, no, Bezusha, let's switch places. Because Rebbe Melech was more closer to the back of the window. The Bezusha was in the front. Let's switch. So you go in, and I'll go out. Okay, so the Melech lays on the outside, the Bezusha goes on the inside, and they get up for Hakafa, third Hakafa. As they get up, they said, this guy should get chap, let's get the other guy. So they go and they grab again the Bezusha, and they pull him out, and that's Knochamo. So after this happened, right, so the Bezusha is laying, they got him all beaten, and he turns to the Melech, and he says, he says, I guess the Bezusha was saying it, I needed it, in his mind, I needed it, but my brother, you're so holy, you're so pure, that you didn't need any zichuchim. So he says to his brother like this, I have one question. I don't know what they say about people that fear the Eibishter. I know you are a Yiddish Shemayim b'tachlis. You fear God with absolute. And therefore, I'm asking you, my brother, imagine this is like after he said, I'm asking my brother, when Adam Adishan ate from the tree of knowledge, I understand how every single neshama participated in that decision to eat. But you, my brother, Rebbe Melech, so how is it that you went along in that Aveda? And from everybody else, but you, as your Nichlal and Adam Adishan, how is it that you ate from the Eitz Hadas? Rebbe Melech answered him. When the Nachash came to them, in other words, he gave his reason why he said, because when the Nachash came to them, the Nachash said to them, he threw into Adam Adishan that if you're going to eat from the tree, you're going to be God. If you eat from the tree, that God ate from the tree, and that's how He created the world. If you eat from the tree, you'll also be able to. You'll be a God, and you'll be able to create worlds. Had we not eaten from the tree of knowledge, all my life I would have been walking around with the thought that had I eaten from the tree, I could also create, and so on and so. It is best, he says, that I should eat and find out the emes. And not walk with that thought. That was Rebbe Melech's answer. We have all neshamas were a chelik of Adam Adishan's neshama. So the Arizal says, this is true about every neshama. The Arizal says, after Mashiach comes, there are going to be neshamas chadashes that are coming into the world. He bases it on a pasuk, I think, that says, Hine boide neshama. There's a pasuk that says, so we're making chadashes ba'aretz, the Eibush is making new in the world. After Bias HaMashiach, there are going to be new neshamas. If they're going to be new neshamas, what does that mean? Neshamas that were never nichlal and Adam Adishan's neshama. These are the out-of-the-box neshamas that are coming after Bias HaMashiach. Now here's the thing. Those neshamas are only going to come out into the world after Bias HaMashiach. But there was one neshama that came into the world from the future world, from the complete future world, from the neshamas that were never part of Adam Adishan. And that's what's mashra from the Rebbe, because the Rebbe is mitzayin. When he says the Altarebe is a neshama chadasha, the Rebbe is mitzayin that what's the beer of neshama chadasha. Look in L'Kutei Torah how the Altarebe explains what neshama chadasha means. So you're talking about completely out of the box, because he's never a chelik of Adam's neshama. If that's the case, I think there's I didn't see this anywhere, on the beer of where the Altarebe knows what the Eibishter's kavanah in creating the world. Especially since we're talking about a taiva that's mushrish and atzmus mamish. How does he figure that out? How does he know that? How can someone know that? But the answer is, I think, very simple. Maybe simple, but it's deep. But it does. And the idea is as follows. It says that that when the Eibishter created the world, b'mi nimlach. Who did the Eibishter consult with? When God was consulting, he consulted. We know he consulted. The question is, with who did he consult? So the Chacham Medrash says that Nimlach b'nishmaseim shel tzadikim. The Eibishter consulted with neshamas of tzadikim. Now, who are these tzadikim that the Eibishter is consulting with? We're dealing with When the Eibush, we're talking about the Eibush consulting to create, which means before there's any Giluyim, before there is Oiden Soif Shalifnei Atzimtzum, before there is the Kav, before there is the Wakampani, before there is the Kav, before there is Ak, Adam Kadmon, before there is all the Partzufim and everything we learn in the Chassidus, we're talking about Atzmus himself. Before there's anything there, what's Shaykh for him to consult? So what's the answer? When he's consulting B'nishmas Tzadikim, what does Chassidus say? Neshamis are Mushrish and Atzmus. So the Eibush is basically consulting with himself to create or not to create. To maybe put it in different terms, the Eibush has a taiva, right? The Eibush do you have to give into every taiva? It has a taiva. The Eibush is supposed to consulting. So yemem all the taivas and it's not all the taivas. To go and create a world and not create a world. In other words, the fact that he wants a dira b'tachtonim, yeah or no? We, as we exist in him, what happened? We, as we exist in the Eibush, they're kind of said, create. Same like Rebbe Melech, as he was in Adam Rishon. We, as we exist as Atzmus himself, said create. That's the Nimlach B'nish B'Seim Shel Tzadikim. So hold it. On that level, did anybody know the Taiva? Did we know what was the motivation? Then we are him. On that level, everybody knows. We know what the purpose of creation is, what the whole deal is all about. It's the Eibush Taiva. The Eibush is burning with a desire to have a dira lo yizbarach b'tachtonim. However, here's the idea: once the Eibush starts the process of creation, and then the Eibush is vayipach ba'ap of nishmas chayim takes a neshama and blows it out in nishmas adam rishon, which nishmas adam rishon include all neshamas. So once that neshama was already exited atzmus, so to speak, to become the neshama koleles of all neshamas in the world, then that neshama is part of the actual creation. It's part of the project. If it's part of the project, it doesn't know what's going on. It's the same idea, like the baby. When the baby is, when we're in our mother's womb, what we know, kol kula. What happens once the baby comes out? We get a clip on the lip, and we forget. Everybody knows that in the 1950s there was a boy in Eretz Yisrael. It's a true story. There was a boy in Eretz Yisrael who knew literally Shas, Mishnah, Novi, Nacht. He knew everything. He was a little kid. They asked him questions. People that were Machaber Svarim would go to this boy. If you wanted to know if your Torah was Torah's Emes, if it had any truth to it, it was Tam Baba Maisis, you would go to this boy and they'll check it out. Because this boy literally knew Kol HaTorah Kula.
At what age was he?
He was a little kid, 5, 6, 7, whatever, a little kid. They brought him then to the Belzer Rebbe. They brought him to the Belzer Rebbe of Adam of Belz. And the elder Rebbe had him alone in the room, and when he came out, he didn't remember it. He wiped his hard drive. He cleaned it. They gave him a clap, whatever, I don't know what it was. Whatever the Malach. No. It was necessary. It was necessary just to show the world maybe that the inyanim, what it says is emes, but it was better for the kid, whatever. So in that case, there is such a ma'isa, and it's a makubalik ma'isa, and there's someone who we know that was this boy. But in any case, the Altarebe, all neshamis, once Adam Rishon was emanated to be a neshama and came out, so then we're outside of Atzmos. Once you're outside of Atzmos, what? You're already inserted into creation. So then, of course, you're trying to figure out what the purpose of creation is from within creation. You're not inside the creator anymore. You're analyzing it from within the project. You're analyzing what could have been the purpose of the one who projected the project, or the one who's emanating the project. How come the Altarebe knows the Savaloy HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael B'dir B'Tachtainim? I think the simple answer. Yeah. He remembers. The Altarebe is the only one who remembered the B'minimlach. When the Eibishter is dialoguing in himself to create or not to create, and he's discussing it with Atzmus himself, with himself, the Altarebe remembers the time. Why? Because the Altarebe is not part of Adam Rishon's neshama. He's never Altarebe. He's a neshama that comes in after Mashiach comes. Those neshamas that are going to come into the world after Bias and Mashiach, that's Atzmus Mamish. Because when Mashiach comes, Atzmus is going to be revealed in the world. So the neshamas that are coming after Bias and Mashiach is Gilui of Atzmus. So how does the Altarebe know Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyos Levi T'Chatayim?
because he's coming. It's an Neshama Chadasha. And he remembered the B'min Nimlach. So the Altarebe is not talking from a sophisticated philosophical discussion over here. He's talking from his Etzam HaNeshama, and his Etzam HaNeshama is Chad Mit Atzmus. By him, the Nes'ava, that the Eibishter is burning to have a Dina B'Tachtonim, is burning inside his heart. It's burning inside his soul. So he's giving us this whole new, and that's why the Altarebe, everything is future. Everything is already Mashiach. Everything is Geula. Everything is. It's not Yiddishkeit kind of that as it's of course it's all based on everything that was tradition coming down from above, but it's energy. It's the energy of Yom Mashiach. It's the energy of the future, because he's a neshama. He's a neshama that's coming from forward, from ahead of time, not from back then. L'chaim u'lebrach.
Very well put. Perfect. Beautiful explanation. The only one. What is this stuff? Understand my question? Bist du der Einzige, was sagt das, oder ist andere?
Chabad.
No, bei uns nicht. Bei
I didn't see this particular word that the Altarebe is the Neshama Chadash. No, the word that the Altarebe is the Neshama, not part of other medicines.
that we heard, that you heard this? I have it.
Yep. The Bemini one. Is to put it
Oh, the whole LA showed up. Well, conversation. The second. I live sitting right next to you, right next to you. Bye-bye. You blew my mind on this one. I'm taking a step further.
Chaim. Izzy says, we need a story. First the story. You know, Chassidim,
I start the night.
Chassidim are relate. The ways of Chassidim, L'chaim, and Mashke has always been part of the experience. And horses, Fed. Chassidim always love talking about Fed. So here's a story of Mashke and a story of Fed. Because now, you know, in the bottom of the Altarebe, there is my mother on the Susasi Berichpe Pari. It happened to be that this last Thursday I taught a mime on the Susasi Berichpe Pari. There's like 3 my mother on the Susasi. Incredible biyunim on horses. But here's a story about horses. Very geschmack story. I mentioned earlier that the Altarebe is here. Chassidus is here to take us. It's Geula. Chassidus is Geula. Chassidus is not something that leads to Geula. Chassidus is Geula. Chassidus is a roisnama from Mitzrayim, a roisnama from narrowness, from constriction, to give us access to Atzmus Mamish, to beyond even Mitzrayim the Kedusha, to unify us with the Kavanah, Pnimis, and Atzmus of the Eibishter himself, and through that take us out of everything, out of every limitation and of every boundary. So in any case, here's 2 stories where the Altarebe Pashat Ariskinum and Mitzarim and Gvulim. Stories that I never heard till I did a little research this year. We had a little fabringen in my shul, Matzah Shabbos, one of the Malka, for the Altarebe, and I was looking up many stories. So the stories, 2 stories, and stories that I haven't seen. Here's Mama Isa. There was once a contractor. He was a building contractor. He used to build various different. A good account, if you can say, what do you call it? So one of the projects, they wanted him to build a ship for the Navy. I guess in his construction, he varies all kinds. He was that some of the builders of the ship decided, these guys, the workers, they cut corners, either out of laziness or they wanted to save money on the material, and they got a government grant, so they were taking over here, cutting over here. In the end, the ship that they built was less than impressive. When they came in, they did an inspection, they found many flaws. These guys didn't want to take they figured, they didn't get into trouble, so they blamed it on the Jew, the owner of the whole project. And based on that, he was a gahak. He asked the Altarebe what to do, and the Altarebe told him that he should go to the market, because he was obviously, besides he had a trial coming up, and besides the enormous fine that he would get, who knows what kind of punishments, because he was basically jeopardizing the Russian government and the military vote, which can cause chas v'sholom, saying to many deaths and so on and so forth. So the situation was very dire for him. So the Altarebe gave him advice, and the Altarebe said he should go to the marketplace. He should find, or should go to a place where he can buy the most magnificent horses he can find. 2 beautiful horses.
They should get a wagon, and he should travel with the horse and the wagon to Petersburg. And in Petersburg, he should park his horse and his wagon not far from the palace, and the place where the in front of the palace. And all day long, he should ride his horse and buggy with these two beautiful horses around the palace. He says that when the Tsar is going to inquire about purchasing your horses, you should tell him that you're giving it to him as a gift. So that's what he did. He got two magnificent-looking horses, went and got the wagon, traveled to Petersburg, and he was hanging out there for a while. And lo and behold, the guy comes out and tells him, "I'm coming in the name of the Tsar." The Tsar looked out of the window, saw the horses, sent him a messenger, and he says, "For how much are you willing to sell the horses?" He said, "These horses I'm not going to sell for any money of the world. But you say it's for the Tsar. For the Tsar, I'm giving it as a gift." So the guy takes the horses and the wagon, and he opens up the gate, and he drives it onto the palace estate. And he asks him for his name, and he wanted to know, who's the one who is giving a gift to the Tsar. He takes his name and contact info, you can say, and he goes in and he tells the Tsar. The Tsar hears about it. He's impressed, and he says, "What's his name?" He tells him his name. The Tsar says, "That's the Jew. That's the guy he knew he had that he had on the that they was being accused for the mishandling of government things." And he said, "He wants to bribe the Tsar? This is what he's doing, bribe the Tsar?" Got very angry. But he said, "You know what? Let me investigate the situation first." So he put up a Vad HaMechkar, a Vad HaChakira. Like in Washington, every day they're setting up new investigations who are investigating the investigators, who are investigating those who are investigating the investigators. So everybody's always... So he set up an investigation on this, an inquiry, what do they call mission? So they started looking in, and they found that these guys did whatever, and they realized that it was their fault, and that the manager, the guy, the Yid who was in charge of the whole project, had no knowledge of it. And based on that, they got into big trouble, and he was vindicated. Came back to the Altarebe, and the Altarebe said, like he was like almost spoiled, like the Altarebe. The Altarebe says the Pashut in the Torah it says regarding a king, that the king should not increase his horses. So down to Zarayef, Amir is the proof that a king loves horses. I think of this, that the way to get to the king is through the horse. That's one Maisa. There's another Maisa that a Chassid and a Misnagid had a Shutzvis. And they had some kind of people would give them monies, and they provided certain, some crop, something that grew. I don't know what it was. To this particular area where they didn't have that growing, and there was a certain thing that they needed. I don't know if it was wheat, barley, or potatoes, or wool, or whatever it was. Not wool, or something. This was people gave them money, and this was the Gentiles, and they had the monies from them, and they would go. And this was their business. One time there was maybe a drought or whatever. Nothing. This chayda didn't work out. So now they were in trouble because they used already the money because they bought whatever they needed, and the rest they squandered, and there was nothing left, and they didn't have the goods, so they were in trouble. They didn't know what to do. So they first of all they would the manashach, if they don't, they'll once they really messed them up, forgot the business. So the chassid said to the misnagid, he says, "You know what? Whether we have this chayda or we don't have this chayda, we got to go back to them. We got to go back. We'll show up. Just to be a no-show, and that they should accuse us that we took their money and ran away, that not. But at least we'll come back. And we'll come back, we'll face it. We'll face the music, as you call. Well, whatever. Yeah, name, but we'll at least come show up." So they decided, the guy thought that, listen, it's dangerous because you go up there, these are peasants, they get angry, they could beat them up, they can, who knows what. Said, no, we're going. They get into the wagon, they're going. As they're going towards this town, the chassid is sitting, and he's first very sad. He's very, very down. Suddenly he starts singing a niggin, and in his niggin, gets a little freiliche. And then he sings another niggin, I'm happy to it, and then I'm happier to it. And before you know it, the chassid gets up and he's dancing on the wagon. Hey, dancing and dancing. And then his joy becomes so intense that he grabs the misnagid and he's dancing with him. He thinks this guy is loony, he's off his mind. Like, what's with him? This guy's not going there, nothing, how get into trouble. They arrive over there, and he jumps off the wagon, and they notify the people found out that these guys came. They're expecting to come pick up the merchandise like it's yearly. He jumps off and he runs to them and he says, "Before we do any business, first I had this brainstorm. I had this brilliant idea, and I got to share it with you." They said, "Okay." He said, "Listen here. We always sit and we party over punch. What was punch? Punch was a certain mixed drink, alcoholic drink, which they would mix whiskey with tea. They mixed whiskey with tea, and that's how they." He said, "I had such an amtzon. we always mix them whiskey with the tea after already the whiskey is made as whiskey, and then later in the process we mix the two, and that's when we make the drink. But I thought if we go to Yahrtzeit, like if we make the whiskey with the tea, it's gonna be a far better drink. So they said, oh, maybe let's try it. So they had the guys who knew how to distillery, and they worked. They produced a batch, and they started pouring the drinks, and it was not really good. And they're pouring, and they're drinking, and they're drinking, and they're more and more and more. And he waits till everybody's dead drunk. Once they're drunk, he turns to them and he says, guys, listen here. I got to go home. Do you want to come take the schayda? I have it in the thing. And they said, come on, while you're rushing, the party's not over. He says, look, I don't have time. I got to get out of here. They said, come on that. They don't want to come. So he says, listen here. If you don't come this minute to take it, the only thing we can do is if you sign over here that, you're canceling the deal, fartik. So he took out the paper, whatever he wrote on it. They signed because they were so drunken. And fartik, they got onto and he tells them, they jump onto the wagon out of town, fartik. That was it. On the way back, the Mitzvah says to him, where did you come up with this? Where did you think of this? Is brilliant. He says, let me tell you, last time I was, this was after the Altarebe's Istalkus. Last time I was by the Altarebe of Yechidus, the last thing he said to me was, with simcha, with joy, you'll get out of your trouble. So, and I thought to myself that the Altarebe was talking about that noise. I was sitting there first sad, then I started, but here's my problem. He said. My problem was, I need to be besimcha, but how can you be besimcha without mashke? I had no mashke, I couldn't drink, and I couldn't be besimcha. I thought to myself, ich will trachten wegen mashke. I'll think about mashke, but macham shemachshavte shalom, trachten wegen mashke, so I'll be besimcha. So I started thinking about mashke, and I'm thinking, and as I'm thinking, no, is metake geworden gut, hab ich getan, and it getracht, so ist wegen mashke, is mich eingefallen. So it occurred to me that you can mix the mashke with the thing, and that's how we came up with it. That's the story. Chaim lebrach. Altarebe slept that earliest, as long as we plug in. Either way, keep simcha seitzei. Chaim lebrach. Chaim, Eli. Working very hard up there. Have a wedding. Your wife's looking fine, huh? That's why we're here. As an introduction to the next notch, I have one more story which this is like a Shmaka Maisa, and then we'll go in. Yeah. Rebbe Oshes Sonkin once met Rebbe Itche the Matzman, and he said to him as follows. This is back in Moscow in Tov Reish Peches. He met Rebbe the Masmid, and he said to him, based on Rambam Perek Yud Aleph, Yamud Melech, Mi Beis David, whatever, and all the thing, it is clear to him that the Frierdiker Rebbe is Mashiach. This is Rav Osher Sasonkin said this to Rebbe the Masmid. And he said, and if so, here you have a person, the leader of the Jewish people. He's fearless. He's not afraid of anybody. He's fighting negative communism, negative maskilim, negative everybody. He's a lion heart. Unbelievable. And he's hoike b'toyre kedavid David, tzaddik, whatever. And therefore, the Frierdiker Rebbe is Mashiach. He was sure. So he said this to the Rebbe the Masmid. The Rebbe Masmid said to him, I have a shmeichel. He said, I have a story, b'negei this Indian, but now I can't tell you the story. So he didn't tell him the story then. A few months later, I think, or a while later, I don't know exactly when, Rebbe Osher cornered him after a fabrengen. I think it was after many hours of fabrengen. I think it was together with Rebbe Yeshua Korf. Two of them, Shia Korf, they cornered him and they said to him, you have to spill the beans. Tell us the story. So he said one time he was by a fabrengen with the Frierdiker Rebbe, I think in Tofresh Pei Zayin, or maybe even earlier, not exactly what short year it was, and I think it was Purim or it was Simchas Torah. I think it was on Purim. And they drink a lot of mashka, and the bitcher was a little high, and he said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, "Ich habe a Meise that I want to tell you." He said, "I want to tell you a story." The Frierdiker Rebbe said, "Ich darf sich nicht zuhören zu deiner Meises." That's what he said? Yeah. Oh, see, I didn't hear it that way. Okay, good. I just read it in Oitzer Chassidim. There's the older, they don't say the perfect words, but in any case, the Rebbe said to him, ich darf sich nicht zuhören zu deiner Meises. An hour or so continued, and Fabrenga went on, and then he said again to the Rebbe, this is a Meise, this is Negeya the Rebbe. So this is a story, this is Negeya to the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's regarding you. The Rebbe said to him, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, the Meises was the Negeya zu mir Vesich. All the stories that are Negeya to me, I know. Like still. Anyways, he was quiet. In the end of the Fabrengen, and Abitcher was already coming out, he was already getting out of his thing, and so the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe turned to him and he said, that's one version of the story. That's there. And he said, that was the one version of the story. The other version is that the Rebbe then said to him, jetzt ist nicht die Zeit of them. During the Fabrengen, jetzt ist nicht die Zeit of them. At the end of the Fabrengen, our Rebbe walked in. This was before the Rebbe was even an Edom then. Our Rebbe walked in, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said, und jetzt verzeih. Now, what's the story? The story is like this. The Altarebe heard from the Maggid that Mashiach is going to come, be either from his oldest student or his youngest student. The oldest student of the Maggid was Rav Nachman of Chernobyl. The youngest student of the Maggid was the Altarebe. Was it the Altarebe gehört? Okay. When the Mittler Rebbe had a daughter, so this is many years later, the Mittler Rebbe had a daughter. She was just born. The Altarebe went to Rav Nachman of Chernobyl, and he came to him and he said, Rav Nachman, I want to do a shidduch mit dir. I have an einikel, a little maidele, just born. I want to take one of your einiklach as a chassan for my. So Rav Nachman said, for you, anyone. You can pick. And Rav Nachman was very poor. The Matal of Chernobyl, the son of Rav Nachman, already created an empire. There was already a Nachvus there. He was a stickle Malchus, it wasn't like Russian, but but Rav Nachman was very, very poor. And all of his children, they all lived in his house. So he had literally a whole nursery going on where they would have, it looked like the hospital nursery. So the Altarebe, he said to the Altarebe, you can come. And the Altarebe went and all the kids were sleeping. And the Altarebe walked around and he put his hands down on the moiches, on the heads of all these children until he found Rav Yaakov Yisrael Chikasser, a little baby. And he said, this is the one. So Rav Nachman said, take this boy and put him on the side. He said, move his crib to the other side. He designated, move him to the other side. Fine. A few years later, I think this was the story that he wanted to say. Not sure. I'm not even sure if he was going to continue and say the rest of the story. But the rest of the story, Adis Mekubal with Chassidim, is as follows. The Altarebe asked they should make Tanoim. So they sat down and literally they wrote a Tanoim. They wrote a, not a Ksuba, but they wrote a Tanoim engagement between this Einikel of the Altarebe, the Mittel Rebbe's daughter, and this boy, this baby boy. Fine, they wrote a Tanoim, Mazel Tov, they said L'chaim. The Nochem of Chernobyl passed away. A few years later, the Baruch comes to town. The Baruch of Mezhebush. He wanted to know who was the Mamai. Maybe he was in the vicinity. I'm not sure. He took a trip special for this. He decided, he wrote into Chernobyl, the Baruch of Mezhebush, the Einikel of the Baal Shem Tov. He wants to know who is the Mamal Mok, who is sitting in the seat of the Nochem of Chernobyl. So he wants to meet the new Rebbe of Chernobyl. So he meets a boy, a little boy. Maybe the boy was 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. I'm not exactly sure. He says to this little yingel, "Wie wohnt der Rebbe?" And he says, "Was ist dein Name? Wie wohnt der Rebbe?" The little boy says, "My name is Yaakov Yisrael." And he said to him, "In was ist Eier Name Rebbe?" This is what he said to the Baruch. So the Baruch thought a little fishy the way he asked him that question. So the Baruch asked him, like, well, my hi, what's this? So he said, "In dezelfde plaats wie ich sehe mein Namen, Yaakov Yisrael, sehe ich Eier Namen Rebbe Baruch." In the same place where I see my name, I see your name. So the Baruch knew this kid is already something. So when he went to his father, the Motel of Chernobyl, he said to the Motel of Chernobyl, "I want this for my Einikel. This boy I want." So he said he's taken already. Show him. Not available. Nicht available. Not available. All right. So the Nochem, so he said, who's the one to talk? And he told him the Altarebe. So the Baruch said, "I want you to cancel the shidduch immediately, and I want to have him as my Einikel, for my Einikel." So the Motel said, "Ashidduch was my tata od gemacht, will ich nicht mevatel sein." Since it was my father who arranged the shidduch and we wrote Tanoim, I'm not going to be mevatel. So the Baruch said, "It's the gain to dein tate, go to the oil of your father and tell your father, as the Einikel from Baal Shem Tov, the Baruch is here, and he's demanding that you should be mevatel the shidduch with the Altarebe and give him to me." So first of all, the Baruch of Mezhebush, you didn't mess. He was a very, very sharp individual. He was not. So the Motel said, okay, he went to his father and he went to the oil there. Then he came back and he told the Baruch nothing to talk about. He said, the Tata had gesagt, that the Baruch is taka an Indian Nyla, that the Baruch is taka a very high Indian, of the Rav, the Altarebe, is Lamaila, is Le'elam and Kol Berchasa. That's what he said. As Baruch is taka hoyach, he's an Indian Nyla, he's a high Indian, of the Rav, the Altarebe, is Le'elam and Kol Berchasa. This was the story. So they bring the story that I forgot already his name, who it was, Krasinowski, said this story to the Rebbe by one of the Fabrengens. He said this story to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was having a big shmeichel. And when he got to the part where he wanted to say that the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "Jetzt ist nicht die Zeit," and then when the Rebbe walked in, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "Jetzt ist die Zeit." The Rebbe stopped him, and the Rebbe said, "Jetzt ist nicht die Zeit." That's the story that they bring in. Again, I didn't hear this from anywhere, but I read it in Yahrtzeit Chassidim. There's this 4 volumes, Yahrtzeit Chassidim, very good Shmakamaisis, stories from the Mashpiyim. So there I saw the story. And anyways, L'chaim L'brach.
It doesn't say she was a wife of the Rebbe. It doesn't say anything like that over there. It says over there. It just says she's an Einikel so.
It's the Frierdiker Rebbe's mother who's an Einikel from this. That's what they've got to say. Yeah. It says she's an Einikel of Rabbi Yisrael Cherkasser.
And of Mitzvah Rebbe. And it's a twice happens to use the Retusha.
So 1 second, you can see that over there.
Yeah, doesn't say anything about the Baal Shasi. It says she's an Einikel of the Cherkasser and the Somer and
yeah,
because you were it's twice.
Yeah.
It's twice. Two
Chernobyl.
Wow, that's Saginar. Your vision is beyond. You can see everything. Oh, wow. All the light you get in Eretz Yisrael, you'll get something much deeper here. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. Why you have to come from Eretz Yisrael? So much. Yes. We talked about it. Chaim I mentioned at the beginning of the Fabrengen, the Rebbe always looked for the Chiddush. The Rebbe always looked for the Chiddush of that particular, of every event.
40 is body them, the bottle them.
It's hard to say this, but obviously, because everything was created l'chvoide for the Eibishter's covet. You see by the Rebbe that the Rebbe always looks for. The Rebbe is like a very big opportunist. He grabs every opportunity and every Indian and he turns it into an advantage. One of the things you see the Rebbe does by all the Fabrengens is he always explains what's unique in that particular setting. Comes out on Tuesday, it comes out on this parsha, it comes out. And the Rebbe also emphasizes a lot the special numbers when we celebrate something, special numbers associated with that celebration. Especially when it comes to our Rabbeim, the anniversaries of certain events associated with various different numbers is always something that's very important. So even though since Tafshin Nun Gimel, since Tafshin Nun Beis and Tafshin Nun Gimel and Dalet,
we don't have the innovative voice of the Rebbe telling us exactly what the Chidushim are. But the Rebbe also gave us, he kind of not prevented it, but prepared us. Because what was once forbidden in Lubavitch, and that is to say a Chiddush, the Rebbe removed that barrier. And the Rebbe, not only the Rebbe demanded what we say Chiddush. And it's something that's very hard, especially for me. It's a little easier because I come from the Pedash of El, so I didn't grow up with that horror that if you say a Chiddush, you're a ganze Yesh and a Metzius and a ganze Chlitzah. But so it's easier for me. I take the liberty to say Chiddushim. Others like the old Mashpi and forget about it. They're going to touch a Chiddush. They're going to make you into a Gal Shalatzamas if you say Chiddush. But today, I'd like to say something new. But the Rebbe said that we have to say Chidushim, and the Rebbe said that the Chidushim that we say is part of Torah Chidushim. I feel like I get a little kleine Yingel. It was like, we want Mashiach now. It was the Chiddush was Keterein and Torah Chidushim etiteitze. Well, we have to listen. The Rebbe hates machen Chidushim. So in any case, what's unique this year? This year is 210 years of the Altarebe system. So I was thinking about what's unique 210, and right away, especially if you ever wants us to koch in Mashiach, first thing that comes into mind, 210 years was the time when we went out of Mitzrayim. We were in Mitzrayim for 210 years, and it was supposed to be 400 years. The Eibishter chopped off Kates, Chishev as a Kates, knocked off 190 years, and gave us in 210 years. So right away, when you hear it's 210 years, the Altarebe is a style, because right away you think Vehimi Kates, that it's a time Mesugel for the Geula. Even though we don't need any more Mesugel de Giyot. The Rebbe said already, Kol Kids, Altfartik, Mashiach, no excuse for Mashiach not to be here. But yet, every time we can find another, to pile onto the Eibishter, another argument that now is the time, and Chas v'Shalom, you shouldn't delay us for another second, is right to do. So definitely. So I hope you'll all be masking to this thought. So that the Eibishter says, I stop done. Geula has to happen this second, even before I even get to say it. L'chaim. Usually, if a rabbi has a word and if someone has something to say, and then he doesn't get to say it, he ends up with a stomachache for state. He didn't digest it because he ended up prepared against the thing. But Mashiach comes right now. Alam Michael signed the Chiddush, so he's very happy. In any case, so here's the thought that I had. Before you ask a simple question, what's the shaykhis? Okay, 210 years was Golus Mitzrayim. But then the whole Golus was 210 years from when they went on to Mitzrayim. Now we have a Golus that's close to 2,000 years. So we should count to the Altarebe's Estalkus. Like, why would that play any role? Like, what kind of Chiddush in Golus or does that have that we should make that a marking point to count from the Altarebe's Estalkus 210 years and say that this year is actually someone put Rabbi Yerachmiel V'Lav except me 2 days ago. He says, I know you get excited about numbers. I'm sure you heard about this, but this year is 100 years since the Frierdiker Rebbe said Basi Legani. The first time the Frierdiker Rebbe said Basi Legani was in Pei Gimel. That's when he said Basi Legani. Was in Pei. That's when he said it. Then he was only Moitzi L'Oyer, the Basi Legani. But the Maimon was actually said in Pei Gimel. So it's 100 years since Basi Legani. So, and it's another thing. This year's Pei Gimel. You want to find all the Inyanim. In tomorrow's Chumash, we're going to learn Moshe ben Shmoinim Shana, Aaron ben Shmoinim V'Shlali Shana. Aaron is a very big part of the Geula. Aaron was 83 years old. This year's Pei Gimel is 83. Anyways, there's all of us need to just give the Eibush to constantly, non-stop. We have to bug him every moment for the Geula immediately. And any kind of connection we can find to the Geula, we have to find. But in any case, what can be the significance of the 210 years of now? First of all, where did the 210 years in Mitzrayim begin? At which time? When Yaakov came to Mitzrayim. Yaakov is the one who opened up the 210 years. We know that the three Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, correspond to the three Avos of Chassidim, or the three Avos of Chassidus correspond to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We know that from all the Sukkos Sichos that the Rebbe gave us, when the Rebbe talks about Chassidish Shpizin, the Rebbe draws the parallels always. Baal Shem Tov and Baal Shem Tov and Avraham Avinu, the Maggid and Yeshev b'Mitzrayim. Yaakov Avinu says. Yaakov says Yeshev. Yeah. So Yaakov is. The Rebbe always tells us that Yaakov is. The Rebbe even says on the pasuk, "V'hoya Beis Yaakov le'esh, u'Beis Yosef lahava." The Rebbe says Beis Yaakov. That's the Altarebe. He's Beis Yaakov. Beis and Yosef. That's the Frierdiker Rebbe. And Beis Yosef, the Rebbe says, is referring to himself. He doesn't say it openly, but mamish, that implies in the Sikha. That's Beis Yosef, that's what causes the Lohava that burns Esav completely, burns down the last powers of Golus and brings the Geula. But in any case, Yaakov and the Altarebe are very deeply related. Because, and we also find, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim, Avodah, and Torah. It's a segol, right? The three things. And Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, and the Altarebe, the Altarebe stands out in Torah. Altarebe, goin b'nigl shnei oyin, the nigla b'chsidis, the highest. So the Altarebe and Yaakov have a lot of parallels. If you learn the story in Bereshis and you read the story of Yaakov, you can't, if you really learn it in a way that you're not just doing mumbling chitas, you're actually sitting and learning it, and especially if you learn it in a way that you don't pre-consume, that you understand it, almost like learning it is the first time you're reading the story, you can't help but have a broken heart for what Yaakov mitgemacht. You don't feel it so much by Avram and Yitzchak. Avram had his challenges. You don't feel in his heart that there was heartbreak. Yaakov says it. Yaakov says, I had a broken life. I had a very, very difficult life. The Rebbe says something amazing in Nun Beis. The Rebbe says that because the in Yaakov is Shlishi Sheba'avos, and his Inyan is the Geula HaShlishis, the ultimate Geula, therefore until his Inyan is not seen through, till Mashiach is not here, Yaakov is a broken person. Every single thing that he has means Chol Zan and Shoiveli. Like the Rebbe says, that's like that's Brochenkeit. Because when your Inyan is Geula, is Mashiach, then everything, if you don't have the final goal, is all garnished. If you take a look and you read, if you take the time to read the Altarebe's life, you see a life of a person that has mitgemacht such deep, soul-wrenching difficulties. He had to stand alone against the Misnagdim. We'll soon see in a moment that the other Chavraya Kadisha that kind of were in his, basically skipped out. They all ran away. Now they went out, Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael and so on and so forth, but they left the Altarebe alone. But more what hurt him even deeper was his own friends. The other Talmidei Baal Shem Tov turned against him, and they felt that the Altarebe is kind of being mishana from the drachim of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, and they accused him. And the Altarebe had enormous heartbreak from that. Besides, so much his daughter Shtena Sarah passed away, and that was as we know, and not Shtena, and that was chilupim on him and the tzad. I mean, the Altarebe had a extraordinarily, excruciatingly difficult life. Literally, you can see Yaakov Avinu in the Altarebe very much. But there's one story in particular that I would like us to perhaps highlight today, which highlights, because one can say, like, where do you find the Altarebe choosing to go to Mitzrayim? You have Yaakov Avinu goes down to Mitzrayim, and he initiated the Golus. So we're talking about 210 years. Is there a moment in the Altarebe's life that corresponds to the Altarebe, like making the choice or kind of going down to Mitzrayim? I think it's not, perhaps you don't see so much emphasized on it, but I think it was a very, 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 a moment that changed the course of history, and I think changed everything. I didn't see this anywhere, so I'm saying it is a chiddush, but when you read the description of how it took place and what happened, I think it's clear. What happened was like this. After the Maggid's Estalkus, the Altarebe, the Chavraya Kaddish divided the provinces. The Altarebe, however, did not want to become a Rebbe. The Altarebe, B'Shimoy didn't want to be a Rebbe, and as long as he was able to be under other Rabbein, he says he's makabel on himself the modest first of it of Ram Malach. Now Ram Malach didn't live too much longer after the Maggid. It's a question of 2 years or 4 years, and he was nostalgic. And even during Ram Malach's life, the Altarebe kind of was hanging on to the Mendele Haradoker, the Mendele Vitebsk. The reason he has both names, initially he lived in Vitebsk, then he moved to Haradok. I'm used to referring to more as a Mendele Vitebsk, but I say Chabad usually the more common name for him is the Mendele Haradoker. Anyways, the Altarebe was a follower of his. He saw him as his Rebbe. Altarebe saw him as his Rebbe. Tavkuv Lamed Zayin, this is 5 years after the Estalkus of the Maggid. And Mendele Vitebsk decided to leave, to make Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. And this was the big Aliyah of the Chassidim. He was joined by Rebbe Avram Kalisker, and he was also joined by Rebbe Yisrael of Polotsk. And the three of them were going to go up to Eretz Yisrael. Now, for sure, Eretz Yisrael was calling. There's no question. The Baal Shem Tov had a strong desire to go to Eretz Yisrael. Tzaddikim that are that can feel the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is pulling their neshamas. So these are spiritual reasons why he went. But there was actually a very, very practical reason why he left. Life for Chassidus in Russia became literally, in Lithuania, and that whole area became literally unbearable. The Redifus, because particularly at the end of the lifetime of the Maggid, that's when the machloikis of the Misnagdim against the Chassidim intensified to levels that were unprecedented before, because Chassidus started becoming a serious threat. The Baal Shem Tov was the foundation, but the Maggid was the one who took Chassidus. And the Maggid, we know, was not so much, he didn't emphasize and didn't spend so much time at Anashim Pshutim like the Baal Shem Tov. The Maggid took, had the foresight to know that he has to establish Chassidus, that it should last, that it's going to need leaders. And the Maggid Pashat gegeben his entire lifetime setting up a whole system of tzaddikim who they themselves will be able to be Rebbes. And therefore, and then they decided that Chassidus will be decentralized, and each Rebbe will go out in his seviv, in his terrain, and from there he'll build Chassidus. So because of that, Chassidus started infiltrating everywhere, and the Mistagdim realized that if they're not going to now, literally declare war on it, it's not going to stop. So at that time, all the charamas came out. They started literally making charamas and chedivs and so on, which in those charamas it stated explicitly, if you are a Yiddish Shemayim, the kol hanageya b'levava, something like that, the Lashon is, anybody who really cares about the Eibishter, you're a real Jew, then you're going to do whatever you can to literally persecute and make the lives of Chassidim miserable. And ad kedei kach, that Chassidim were lynched, they were beaten, and there were stories of Chassidim were literally killed. That's that. Chassidim of the Mendel of Vitebsk were killed. Then there were people and then there were those that were maimed, and also regarding Parnassa, no one wanted to do business with them. So Yidden were pashat suffering, and as a result of that, it became literally, and it was only intensifying every day, and therefore the Rabbeim that were in Russia couldn't handle it, and it was normal that it didn't feel almost like that in Lithuania, that whole area, that the Polish Rabbeim had much less esnagdus. They were like the Chabad houses going out into various evil, simple people. They loved them and so on and so forth. But in Lithuania, where all the big yeshivas were, where all the big London were, and so on and so forth, that's where you had the esnagdus. And this was so. Therefore, they left. They were going to go and serve. And who needs the headache? Serve and live their life by Avodas Hashem and Eretz Yisrael. The Altarebe decided to join this aliyah. He left Liozna. His brothers came along with him. Altarebe then wasn't officially a Rebbe yet, but he had hundreds or maybe thousands of people that were already saw himself as his mushpoyim, that they were davuk in the Altarebe believe in nefesh. They begged the Altarebe not to go, not to leave them, and the Altarebe answered to them, "Chayecha koyim. This is a matter of life and death for me. I'm not a Rebbe yet. He said, I have a Rebbe. I can't be without my Rebbe. Talmud shegola, megal and Rabbi Imoy. The Talmud goes along with the Rebbe. He's my Rebbe. I have to go with my Rebbe. So the Altarebe ignored all the pleas, and I'm sure the pressure was enormous, and he went. From the Altarebe's writings, it implies that the Maggid even came to him, and it says over there Bahakits, not Becholim. Literally, he saw the Maggid, and the Maggid. I'm sure it wasn't a Pekida. I'm sure it wasn't the Maggid telling him, but often that he has to do so, or else the Altarebe would have listened. But I think that a Maggid was persuading him to stay, and that he should take responsibility for all world Jewry at that place, but the Altarebe refused. And he went, and they joined along this whole caravan. When they came to the city of Moldova, what was it called? Moldova. And they came to the Dnieper River, the Mendel of Vitebsk stopped the whole caravan, and even though, obviously, every delay, they didn't have any, they had food, provisions, hundreds of people joined them. 3 ships left, 3 ships. The Nasiya itself was horrific, and many of them didn't survive, even the Nasiya. And they also, it's an interesting thing. I listened, by the way, just a very geschmack. I don't know, just to get away. I'm saying there was also a chukka to go to Eretz Yisrael and all the Inyanim, but it was. Anyways, when they went, by the way, I listened to his Rabbi Paltiel's Inside Chassidus History on the Rebbe, and it's phenomenal. So a lot of. He explains the fundamentals over here. A lot of the stories very geschmack. But anyways, as they went up but at this point, also whoever came was mechuyev to have money. That's what initially. You're only allowed to join the journey if you had, not just for the journey, if you had money to be able to support yourself in Eretz Yisrael for a while. They couldn't afford that suddenly it's going to fall on them to support all these people. And then Eretz Yisrael, there would be no way of, so they all have to have a certain amount of money. But the Poyal Mamish, a lot of people didn't listen, and hundreds of families joined, people who anyways were poor, and they joined along, and it turned out to be an enormous burden on the whole group. After they cracked it, the Yisrael of Politz, because one of the tzaddikim who went, the moment he got there, saw that they're never going to make it, turned around, and came back to start raising money. And then the Altarebe, here's the crazy story. When the Altarebe turned around and went back to Russia, not only is he going to have to deal with the people to fortify Yiddishkeit in Russia and to build cities in Russia, it became his burden to take care of all the whole Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. It was all on the Altarebe. But in any case, the Mendel of Vitebsker stopped the whole caravan, and he spent 2 weeks trying to dissuade the Altarebe from continuing on the journey. The Altarebe was with him in Yechidus every single day for hours they spent together. And even though it was an enormous cost, as we're saying, for 2 to 3 weeks, I'm not exactly how sure it was, and finally the Altarebe made the decision to turn around. He relented, he turned around, and he went back to Russia. I think it was at this moment when the Altarebe turned around and decided not to join the Mendel of Vitebsker and go to Eretz Yisrael, that the character of the next couple of 100 years changed, obviously. The Avoid of Chabad dramatically changed. But more than anything, I think the nature of the Geula, of how Mashiach is going to come, and the entire character of eternity changed in that decision. Meaning, had the Altarebe gone to Eretz Yisrael, it would have been in one way, and the fact that the Altarebe decided to stay in Chutz Li'aretz and stay. The Altarebe heard from the Maggid that there are neshamas that are shaykh to Eretz Yisrael, and the word the Maggid said to him was like this: the are neshamas was darfen Eretz Yisrael, is the neshamas was darfen that dafke need Chutz Li'aretz. And the Altarebe was implying that the Maggid had already told him that his neshama needs Chutz Li'aretz. This was the moment. If you Altarebe, you ever learn the Chassidus, you know the Altarebe is in a state of, always speaks about the state of Yahrtzeit, and you're in a state where you're ready to expire, and then you have to hold yourself back and rip yourself away, because you have to have bittul to the Eibishter, and what the Eibishter wants is more important than what you want, even though you have an infinite quest to literally dissolve yourself in God's light. You have to schlep yourself away and turn back down, because you know that the Eibishter's kavanah overrides your interest, and the Eibishter's interest is last of all yizbarach dira b'tachtainim. So you have to come down. This was a general moment of the Altarebe's life where the Altarebe had to make that decision, because in Eretz Yisrael, what was awaiting the Altarebe was the biggest giluyim over Eretz Yisrael. Who can feel kedushas Eretz Yisrael if not for the Altarebe? Imagine the Altarebe would go up and make himself a chassidus there in Tzfas, on a holy mountain next to the Meron, next to the Rashbi, and it would have been wow. Okay, whether it was Tzfas, Tveria, wherever they ended up with. First they went to Tzfas, actually, then they came down to Tveria. Imagine what kind of godly lights and godly experiences they would experience. But at that moment when the Altarebe called out. I don't think he called it out, but his actions called out. Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden, ich will nicht dein Olam Haba, ich will nur dir allein. Was will der Eibishter allein? Atzmos is not to be found in the Giluyim of Tzfas and the Giluyim of Eretz Yisrael. In order to arrive to Atzmos and Mahus Mamish, you're going to have to go down and under you're going to burrow into the depth of Golus, into the depth of darkness. So it wasn't just the fact, and it describes, it describes when the Altarebe decided to turn around. It wasn't just a simple turnaround. It says over there in Beis Rebbe, it says, that the Altarebe was crying b'chiyas neiros. I think it uses the lashon like it says by David HaMelech. David Higdil, that his crying was even more than Yonasan. He cried she'en kamoyu. It was like a moment of such heart-wrenching. It took everything from the Altarebe to make that decision to turn around and go back into Russia. But I think it's not that the question was just what was going to be in Russia right now. The question is, see, when the Altarebe decided to go back into Russia, it wasn't just a decision to go back into Russia. The decision was, if the avoid is going to be an ufarasta yom of a kedma tzafoin of an egma, The question was, is Chassidus going to arrive on the shores of America? Is Chassidus going to go all the way into the lowest of the low? And in Tachten Shein Tachten Lamatrim Meno, is it going to break open the root of darkness? And in darkness, it's going to discover Atzmus. See, the whole idea that the Altarebe says, Yesh Agashmi is Yesh Amiti. These Giluyim, the Altarebe says that Mitdafke Gashmi is Mitziyusay Me'atzmus. Like, it's all because the Altarebe is now oisik in the avoid of Bidur HaTachten. Now, what do I mean by that? In Chassidus, it describes and it tells us many places. Had the Yidden, we know that our job is to do Bidur HaMitzutzos, right? We know our job is to do Bidur HaMitzutzos. We have to mevare Mitzutzah Kedusha that are everywhere. But the question Chassidus asked, what would happen if we would never, because we sinned, we went to Golus. So the question is, what would happen if we would not have sinned? How could it be there and not have sinned? And all these Nitzutza Kedusha would have remained, Chas v'sholem, unrectified and unredeemed. What's the answer? It says that had we done what we should have been doing, then in Eretz Yisrael, we would have created such a powerful light, such a powerful blaze, that it would have served as like an Even HaMoshech. It would have served like a magnet. And that powerful magnet would have pulled all the Nitzutza Kedusha from everywhere, and it would have brought to Eretz Yisrael. Same question is with Adam Rishon. If Adam Rishon wouldn't have sinned, how would you have the Nitzutzas, the Bidur? Because a lot of Nitzutzas fell by Adam's sin. But before, what happens? If Adam Rishon wouldn't have sinned, it was still Shviras HaKelim. How would we have elevated all the sparks of holiness? It says he would have done it in a way, in other words, if you create powerful lights from above, you can attract Nitzutza Kedusha that are on the other end of the world. Right? Fine. So had the same is true would have been if Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, if Yaakov Avinu would have not have gone down to Mitzrayim, what would have happened? We could have, I did the Nitzutza Kedusha in Mitzrayim. They could have been Moishechet. They could have been in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, by Shlomo Melech. This is what the Rebbe explains it in many places. By Shlomo Melech, Malka Shava, they all came. Why? So then the question is, why Taka did Adam Rishon sin? And why Taka did we sin? So we know the Chassidus says, ultimately, this was the Eibishter's Kavanah. Why is it the Kavanah? So Chassidus explains, because had we done it the other way, even though it would have been much easier and much kishmak and much more beautiful, without getting our hands dirty, it would never be a real bidur. It's a superficial bidur. It's a bidur ma'il lamata is not a thorough bidur, because it's never true about the tachten. All the chassidus of the Rebbe is masber this Indian. So much of the Rebbe's chassidus. If you don't get your hands dirty and you don't go down into the tachten, into the kishkis of the tachten, it's the only way to do a real thorough bidur is to go down into the kishkis in the tachten, into its innards, and from there, by being the Lashon Chassidus says you have to dress yourself b'levushay hamizbarer. You have to go into the garments of the one that's being refined, and dafka from there you can extract it, you can elevate it, you can transform it from within. That's the avodah. Now this is hinted to in the 210 years. Why? On the word, where do you find 210 years? The first time mentioned in the Torah. I think it's the first time when Yaakov tells his children, "Redu shama, go down over there." He tells his children, you go into Mitzrayim, Redu Shama, go there. Redu is Gematria 210. So going down for the 210 in order to elevate sparks. But the Redu, in Chassidus it says that the word Redu, Reid, has another pirush. Redu also comes in the word to govern. The Yirdu B'dgas Hayom. When again Mashiach Tzidkenu, what does it say? The Yerd miyom el yom, that he's going to master, he's going to govern, he's going to dominate. Miyom el yom. In other words, bechitzonius, when we go down to Mitzrayim, what does it look like? We're being enslaved. We're being subservient. We're going into the shibud of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is dominating over us. B'pnimius, it's Eisa sheshala to Adam ba'Adam l'ra'lo. It's a pasuk in Kehelis, I think, or in Mishlei. It says there, I think it's Kehelis. The time that the Klippa dominates over Kedusha, it's to its own disadvantage of the Klippa. Because by it taking Memshala over a Neshama, or over, ultimately the Nitzutz eats it inside out. It eats out its stomach. It empties its energy. Like we know, Yidden go to Golus, and in the end, the Yidden walk out with all the wealth of Golus. So, B'chitzayni is the Golus seems to to trap a Jew. The Pneumius, the Yid is trapping the goat. So here's the idea. The Altarebe had gone to Eretz Yisrael. Chassidus would have been a complete different Chassidus. It would have been a Chassidus with Isaac, with Giluyam Omayla, and even though it would have had to a certain degree a bit of the world, but it would have been a very peripheral, what's the word? Peripheral bitter. It would have been a superficial bitter. And it wouldn't have gone global, and it would definitely not have been a Faratz Toyom of a Kade Matzafan. You know when the Rebbe says this? The Rebbe says that like when the Rebbe speaks of the famous sikh about France, the Rebbe says that France was such a klipa shvela, we would never be able to elevate it. The Altarebe himself was not going to touch France. But the Rebbe says after the avoid of our Abayim, that means after the avoid of Chassidus of a few generations, we were able already to go into the Tachten and go into France, and from France we can pick up the whole world. In other words, the question is like this, bottom line, the question is like this. When Mashiach is going to come, is it going to be a Mashiach who's going to come from Eretz Yisrael? Which means, is it going to be a Mashiach that's going to come through powerful miracles from above, in which he's going to like overwhelm the world with his miraculous light and shine the Eibishter's light everywhere and stun the world with godliness? Or is Mashiach going to come from the lowest place of the world? The Mashiach is going to be a Tzemach David Avdecha Mehiras Atzmiach. It's going to be a Tzmicha Metachtin. It's going to come from the world. It's going to come from within the lowest of the world. Now you see in the Rambam, you see these two. In Hilchos Malachim, the Rambam discusses a Mashiach that's what? Very much Ani v'roichav ala chamoyer. Yamoid Melech, a king will get up. It's a natural Mashiach. A Mashiach that's it's a worldly process. In Egeres Atemon, the same Rambam discusses Mashiach. He says Mashiach is going to be a person no one knows about. He's going to pop out of the sky. He's going to do massive miracles. He's going to come. He's going to be in Eretz Yisrael. That's what he says. And he's going to do big miracles. And because he does big miracles, everybody will know him. So which are they? But Pashtus, the Rambam, these two visions of Mashiach are what? What the Gemara says. Mashiach can either be Ari, Aru, and Anana Shemaya. He can come from heaven above, or Mashiach can come Ani v'Reichel al Chamoyer. Now, which one is Gishmakir? Gishmakir is Aru and Anana Shemaya. The easier way is what? If it comes from above. But the kavanah of Atzmos. What does the Eibishter want? The Eibishter wants that the world should be mezuchach be'emes. That our chumrius of our gashmius should be we from our grubster point. Literally, the grubster point in the world should know the Eibishter from within itself. And that bitter requires that we go into the Golus itself. We dig in. And for that, the Altarebe needed to start explaining a whole new understanding of gashmius. The old understanding of godliness and gashmius would not suffice to be able to give us the koiches to get into the darkness, literally, and break up the darkness from the bottom up. And I think, if I can say, that because at that moment, the Altarebe was mevatel himself completely, at that moment, because as you see, he wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. At the moment that he put himself to the point that he had no metzias at all, only the Ratz and the Elyon, from that moment, his heart is no more his heart. We spoke earlier. The taiva of the Eibush and the Sava Kadosh Baruch Hu is the Altarebe's taiva. It's his heart. It's flowing through his blood. And as a result of that comes Titus Chassidus the way it is now. And we have a Mashiach that's both Ariyam and Anana Shemaya, but also Anivira. I think it says somewhere that Loi Zachu means that we take the Loi, all the matters of Loi, and we make Zachu from Loi. We take all the inyanim that are so Loi, they're so negative, they're so dark, and we make a Zachu. We mezachich the Loi, we mezachich the no, and when we mezachich the no, that's when Oni v'roichev ala chamoyer. You have a whole different Mashiach. So the other week, someone told me a metaphor where he's discussing that. Holy Shapiro just told this to me last week that there were cows. That when a storm is coming, the cows see the storm. And when they see the storm, they get terrified of the storm. So they start running away from the storm. And they run and they run. But the storm eventually catches up with them. By the time the storm catches up with them, they're so tired, they collapse. And they're laying over there, and as a result of that, the storm is pounding them and pounding them and pounding them relentlessly. And they were already out of breath even before the storm started, before it even got, but it eventually catches up with them. The buffalo are different. What do the buffalo do? They see the storm coming, and they decide to charge right into the storm. As they go, thousands of bison, they're going as they gain, and as they're running towards the storm. So as they run towards the storm, first of all, the storm passes them 1, 2, 3. And when they engage the storm, they're with all their strength and all their power. And obviously they survive the storm. Because they not just survive it, they thrive, they grow, they develop. It's beyond because of their charge into it. And that's the Nakuda. On that time, the Altarebe basically turned around and decided to charge the darkness. To charge the darkness. The Altarebe cried out, I'm bottled to Atzmus Mamish. What does Atzmus Mamish want? What does Eberster want? He wants Dida Loylis Barach B'Tachtainim. Darkness is not going to fool